Hello everyone and welcome to Lesson 18, Supporting Literacy in the Language Arts class. So over the last few lessons, we've gone from the world, looking at literacy from a world point of view, down to the US, down to Canada, down to Medicine Hat, down to literacy in all of our classrooms and all of our subject areas. Now what we're going to do basically for the rest of the course is be looking at how do we support literacy skills, particularly in language arts class. So that's our focus now, really for the next few weeks. Okay, so let's have a go. So what does this look like in a language arts class? So as we go through the following pedagogical components, I want you to, again, be thinking about, have you seen the following in your practicum? What has been the most effective way for students to learn the literacy skill? And what have you found that has not been effective? So as we go through here, just jot some things down and we'll have a chance in Collaborate to chat a little bit about what you've been finding out there is effective and what's not effective. Okay, so generally, let's start off with factors to consider when teaching literacy. So our document, which is the Alberta Program of Studies, which you've all had to go with in your lesson planning. So you already are aware of what is in that document. So you always have to keep that kind of at the forefront when you're planning. We also have to think about our learners, right? So who are the particular students that are sitting in front of us? So do we have culturally and linguistic diversity in our class? So do we have some ELL learners? Do we have students that are coming maybe from different cultural backgrounds that may be looking at material or even how to learn in a different way? Okay? We have to be considering socioeconomic status. So we know that some of our lower socioeconomic status students may not have had the same opportunities as higher socioeconomic status. That's not necessarily always the case, but you may just need to be taking that into consideration. We also need to be looking at gender. Generally, girls will have stronger literacy skills than boys, but that is a bit of a stereotype, right? And so then we can't just assume that our boys will not be as strong a readers as our girls. So again, we have to always have that critical lens on our own practice and on our pedagogy that we are then choosing. Okay? And then we need to be considering theoretical perspectives on reading. So let's have a go with some of these. So basically, there are kind of three main theoretical perspectives on teaching literacy. The first one is called the bottom-up perspective, which is where you start with phonics. You start with letters and sounds, then you move into words, then you move into sentences, then you move into text, and then you move into meaning. So there was a real focus on phonics in the 1960s and 1970s, and it was very hierarchical. Like everyone started at figuring out the sounds of the words and putting words together like at, cat, right? That's what I mean. And then building up to meaning. It kind of fell out of vogue when, in about the 1980s, when we started to go with more of a top-down perspective, and that's called whole language. Okay, so that's a perspective where we teach students to learn how to read by giving them words and sentences and books and whole language. We don't divvy it up into sounds to the parts of the words. Okay, and their readers are really seen as problem solvers. So they're being asked to look at this and figure it out, reading out from a variety of views. Well, as perspectives and theories are wont to do, late 1990s, we got into more of a balance, what was called balanced literacy. And this was where we did teach some phonics, some how to actually sound out words, but then we also taught some whole language where they were talking about comprehension and stories and themes at a very early age, like K in grade 1. We weren't so focused on just the phonics. So there's this balanced literacy. And balanced literacy also came up with other ways other than just sounding out words for figuring out what words, how to read the words. And again, as theories are wont to do now in 2020, there's a bit of a kickback against balanced literacy in that the theories of how to actually teach students to learn to read are actually not the best, and maybe the best are the yeah, you know it, you know what's coming. Maybe the best way to teach reading is actually back to phonics, right? So that's sort of the overall arching perspectives on teaching literacy that you will find out there. We will spend a lot of time in EDUC 3103 talking about these, but just to get you thinking about these, and you're probably seeing these in your literacy practicum. Okay, so these are, so again, when you go to a party and you're hanging out with a whole bunch of literacy teachers and maybe a speech pathologist, and and you get talking, you will inevitably get talking about teaching, and maybe particularly teaching literacy. These 8, 9, 10 names that are here are sort of your gurus of theoretical researchers on teaching literacy. And they cover the whole gamut of these perspectives. So some of them are very much phonics based, some of them are totally whole language, and some of them are big proponents of balanced literacy. Okay, so let's have a look here. So we have Marie Clay, who is Reading Recovery Program, and she is sort of one of the gurus around running record, and we are going to jump into running record when we get into the assessment portion. There's Louisa Moats, who teaching reading is rocket science, saying that teaching reading is hard and it's not intuitive. We have Fontes and Pinnell, which is, you've probably seen Fontes and Pinnell in your classrooms, or some form of Fontes and Pinnell, and we have talked about Fontes and Pinnell. Lucy Culkins, she does lots of reading and writing workshops. We have Richard Allington, who is very much into independent reading. Timothy Shanahan is very much into phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocab, and comprehension, so sort of the big 5 ideas. Sharon Vaughn, lots of work she's done on reading interventions for students with learning disabilities and ELL. Kenneth and Yetta Goodman are definitely whole language proponents, and David Pearson is all about, we got to get these kids to comprehend what they're reading or else it's kind of useless. Okay, so again, we will jump into these guys a lot more in depth in 3103 in our next year's course. But again, these guys should be on your ePortfolio as potential researchers that you should know about as future literacy teachers. Okay, so let these names spin off in the conversation so that you sound, yeah, well, according to Louisa Moats, reading is actually really quite difficult. It is actually rocket science. Okay, so it sounds really cool if you can spew out some of these names. Okay, here we go. Let's talk about supporting all students in our classroom. Basically, the best line of support for literacy for all learners is an effective classroom literacy program. Only about 5 to 10% of learners who struggle with literacy require intensive, individualized sort of tutorial or pull-out programs. Only 5 to 10%. 90 to 95% of children will learn to read with careful and intentional individual instruction with accurate and individual assessment in your classroom. You know these kids the best as the teacher. So 90 to 95% of your kids, if you have an effective and efficient literacy program in your class, 90 to 95% of your kids will learn how to read without having any kind of pull-out programs. Okay, So, oh, click to add title. That's fun. So what does an effective classroom literacy program begin with in an elementary classroom? That's the million-dollar question, which we are now going to answer. Okay, so here you go. Didn't have to wait very long for the answer. Basically, effective literacy program. These are kind of the 5 big things you have to be thinking about. Physical space, time, planning or instructional strategies, materials, and assessment. So I have instructional strategies and assessment in brackets because we're going to look at those specifically later on, but I kind of wanted you to just be thinking about them when you're thinking about overall effective literacy programs. Okay, so let's jump into space. Basically, your physical classroom space. So we're talking about your actual environment. What you want is you want an in-class library with a large selection of amazing children's literature. I am a bit of a follower of Jennifer Gonzalez's podcast called Cult of Pedagogy. And she often states that as classroom teachers, we need to have 1,500 books in our in-class library so that students are always surrounded by books. They always see books and they always have access to books. And what I will say to you is when you start out your first year of teaching, you will have 6 books on your bookshelf. And you don't want to go out and buy a whole bunch of books. You don't want to go to Chapters and buy a whole bunch of books. Let's start collecting. If you go to a garage sale, if you go to the thrift store, if you see books, kids' books, the library has a used book sale, you just start to grab some of those books and you start to create your in-class library. And that's what she says, 1,500 books we want in our in-class library. And but you start with 6. Don't panic. You don't have to have 1,500 when you first start teaching. Okay, the next one is looking for books. Last year, one of our retiring teachers actually came to Medicine Hat College with all of her resources, all of her books, and she put them out in S103, and our 3rd and 4th years just came, and it was like a crazy garage sale, crazy amazing garage sale. Okay, so again, those are the opportunities that you will have to grab those books. Okay, word walls. What you want is you want lots of words around the walls. You want sticky notes, you want maybe Velcro, you want them to be a bit interactive so they can actually grab the actual word off the wall, kind of like a sticky note, right? You just want to be able to, grab that word, grab that sticky note, and take it with them to their desk. I had a student teacher do a weird word wall where kids could find the weirdest word that they wanted, and write it out, write it definition, and then put it on the weird word wall. It was kind of cool. So again, lots of words, so they're seeing literacy all the time. Carpet. You probably want to have some kind of carpet in your room. If you're teaching grade 6, they might start to think that carpet is a little bit baby, a little bit K-3, but there's so much good stuff that happens on carpet time when it's not COVID time, when you are physically close together, when you can bounce ideas, when they can see the pictures of the books. If you can. Generally, classrooms don't come with carpets. You have to buy one, but if you can get one cheap, IKEA or end of a roll, it's super good time for our students to learn literacy skills when they actually come together on the carpet. Keep your materials organized. So where are your papers? Where are your pencils? Where are your books? If they're all over the place, you're going to waste a lot of time and you will end up with classroom management issues. Okay, so keep all your materials organized. Student work posted. Put up as much student work as you can in the classroom. It's motivating for the students to see their own work up there, and it shows them that their work is important. It's important enough for you to take a tack and put it on the wall. I have seen the good old flip chart, like the old flip chart where the paper, just keeps flowing. I've seen that work really well because unlike digital, if you have it on your smartboard or on a PowerPoint or something, if you have information, is that kids can go back to that flip chart and they can be like, oh, what did she say about using a semicolon? They can actually just go and flip back to that flip chart. So that's a really good way to support literacy. And you want your classroom, your physical classroom, to be really conducive, have a conducive atmosphere for reading. So have a couple bean bags. Maybe you can sneak in a couch in the back, have some nice little lamps that they can sit. So make it really conducive. I've been in several classrooms here in Medicine Hat, and it is really unbelievable. And there's all these little low lights, and they can sit together if they're sitting quietly, and it's just really supportive of reading versus the bright lights, everybody's sitting at their desk. The desks are not that comfortable for those kids, and they're sitting on them a lot. So if we can really support them physically, it helps in there. Okay. However, I must admit, sometimes as a faculty advisor, when I go out and watch student teachers and I'm in those classrooms with all those low lights and it's after lunch, I'm like, I'm kind of sleepy. But it definitely has a calming atmosphere. Okay. What I want you to do now is I want you to stop me and I want you to go and look at these physical spaces in these classrooms and how these physical spaces support balanced literacy. So I have a pre-K and a K class, so you can go there and it's a 3D, hit the little eyes because it'll tell you specifically what is going on there. And if you find that very busy, it's a very busy classroom, go to a grade 6 classroom, which is very, very grade 6, but still very much supporting literacy through the physical space. Okay, so go there, stop me, go there, have a look. Okay, aren't those cool? The pre-KK would make me crazy because it's just so busy, but those kids they're just surrounded by literacy, as are the grade 6s, but in a very age-appropriate, cognitively, cognitive development, all that appropriate. Okay, so now your turn to dream a little. What I want you to do is, how would you set up your classroom to support literacy development if budget and space was no issue? So don't get bogged down in, we have no money, blah, blah, blah. Draw out a classroom, pen and paper, draw it out, and include practical to outrageous ideas. Some of the ideas have been like popcorn machine, ponies, have some fun. And then what we'll do is we'll have a bit of time and collaborate to share those ideas. Okay, let's continue with another aspect of teaching literacy is time. Basically, you have ELA, English Language Arts, is given 95 minutes per day in elementary. So 95 minutes per day, and you think, wow, that's a long time. It gets eaten up pretty quick. I would suggest that you think about maybe having a short time block and maybe a longer time block. Short time blocks keep you organized and your lesson's really super focused. You want to go 30 minutes will only probably give you time to go after particular language arts outcomes. But it does keep you focused. Longer times you can explore and apply concepts. You can then bring in different curricular outcomes from different subjects like science and social. And again, it just gives you a little bit of time to really dive in to allowing the students to work and for you to have time to float around. But 95 minutes a day, that's your time in Alberta for ELA. Okay, let's jump now into planning and instructional strategies. So basically, our overarching goals for literacy instruction. These are the 6 aspects that I want you to be thinking about when you are planning your ELA lessons. So you want to have daily independent reading and read aloud. So they should be daily independently reading their own choice book. So not a book that you give them, but their own choice book. And you should do a read aloud. I'm going to get into that a little bit later. Number 2, there should be daily independent writing time, again, where they're actually putting pen to paper and writing about something that is of interest to them. Again, not a prescribed, you must write a paragraph about squirrels and it must have a topic sentence, yada, 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 but just pen to paper, boom, boom, boom. They need to learn how to read. Obviously, there's some things that you have to go after particularly. So they have to look at sight words, they have to look at grammar, they have to look at phonemic awareness, all those kind of things. You want them to be able to apply reading skills and strategies. So again, reading text independently for info or for pleasure. So that's where they are, again, starting to see that reading, there's a particular purpose behind reading. They are going to learn how to write. So their letters, write words, that's where they're going to work on spelling and punctuation, and they're going to apply writing skills and strategies. So for stories, for blogs, for podcasts, whatever they're doing. So those are sort of the overarching goals, is what we want to be thinking about when we are planning our literacy program, and then when we're planning our literacy time in there. Okay. There's always terminology around basically everything. So I wanted to go through this. What I'm going to do now is, I was talking about sort of reading and writing here for overarching goals. What I'm going to do now is focus just on reading. Okay, because I'll just circle that. We're just gonna focus on, wow, this is exciting. I thought I had my pen going here. We're just going to focus on reading, because writing I'm going to do a whole other lecture just on writing, because it's again another big concept. So we're going to look at these terms. So we're going to look at sight words, read alouds, language experience, book discussion groups, modeled and shared reading. I have and writing, just so you know that this applies to both, but I'm going to focus on reading, and guided and independent reading, and of course writing in there as well. Okay. So let's start with sight words. Sight words are basically words that appear frequently in most texts that children read. They're not particularly easy to sound out, and learning to recognize through sight is easiest and quickest to progress and gain confidence in reading. Okay. Now, there are some, like I said, remember I said at the beginning where it started with phonics as a philosophical idea, and then it went to whole language, and then it went to balanced literacy, and now it's kind of going back to phonics. There are some phonics programs, theorists, thinkers out there that say that kids really shouldn't have to memorize. They should be taught enough phonemic awareness to understand how to sound out sight words. But the dominant idea out there around sight words is that these need to be memorized, and so that when a student comes to this word in the text, they know it by sight, they can recognize it, they don't get bogged down in sounding out the and to and what and that, those kind of words that are constantly in textbooks. Okay, so what I want you to do, again, is stop me and just go to these websites. So these are the Dolch sight words, and Dolch is just the name of the person who put them all together. I put here, great website for lists of sight words and flashcards. So again, you should not be writing out this. All of these are on tons of flashcards that you can just download, print, and cut. And then these are all of the Dolch sight words in alphabetical order, and sometimes that's helpful, but this is all the way from K to grade 3. This website here lists some K, this is what they should know, grade 1, grade 2, grade K. So go and have a look at these, and again, especially if you are in K to 3 practicum, think about, can my kids actually read these words by sight? Okay, so go have fun with those websites for a sec. Okay, so now you have an idea of what the sight words are. This is just a little story, and what I did was I put in red all of the sight words. So once upon a time, there were four brothers who lived in a faraway land. Their father was an old king. One day he said, I will not live long now. Today you must start out into the world. In a year, bring back the best thing you have found. The one who can pick the best thing shall be the new king. So you can see if a child has to stop and sound out all of these sight words, think about how bogged down they get in the text and how frustrated they are and how much mental energy is taken in just trying to figure out these words that they keep seeing and keep seeing and keep seeing. Okay, so again, there's the concept that these words need to be memorized in there. And we're going to do a little bit, you don't have to prep anything for Collaborate, but I'm going to bring in some actual samples of children's books, and we'll have a go with pulling up the sight words in Collaborate, but you don't have to do anything to prep for that. Okay, let's now talk about read aloud. This is one of my favorite things. Read aloud, this is you reading books to students. This is what I do with you when I just read a book to you. There are no questions, there's no assessment, there's no tell me about the author. There's nothing linked to it other than hopefully just enjoyment. You get to enjoy a good story, you get to just relax for a little bit and get lost for a few moments. That's what read aloud is. And I think this is an amazing concept around read aloud. Read aloud is the single most influential factor in a young child's success in learning to read. So it's not just as fun and it's entertaining and it fills in the gap before recess when your lesson was 5 minutes short, so you got to fill in time. It is absolutely crucial that students hear you read aloud, which is why I had you do that first assignment, so that you build up your confidence, you start to read with expression, and you buy in that reading books, picture books, storybooks, chapter books is hugely important. Okay. Teacher needs to read aloud to students for enjoyment. It's not linked to questions or testing, and students hear experienced reader read. They develop listening skills and they develop speaking skills. It is the single most influential factor. Isn't that crazy? It's not grammar. It's not worksheets. It's reading aloud. So always keep daily read alouds as a huge part of your literacy time. Okay, this is a book that I'm super excited about. Maria Walther she put together, it's called the Ramped Up Read Aloud. And what I want you to do is, again, just go to this webpage, and this is a little bit of an interview with her. And I love that her sort of modus operandi is read aloud should equal joy. And that's what we want. We want our kids to enjoy reading. What do we see oftentimes when kids are asked to read? It's tough and they don't like it. We want to flip that around so that they find a lot of joy in reading. This particular book is used at Southview School and Ross Glen School, I know of for sure. It's probably used in other schools, but I'm actually going to bring it to Collaborate on when we meet and Collaborate, and I'll show you kind of what's in it. But what I want you to do is just read on this website, read a little bit of the interview up to when you see this frequent read aloud experiences. I thought I'd just put that there. So read up until there just so you get a bit of a sense of why we need to be excited about read alouds. Okay, language experience. What we want to do to promote literacy in our language arts classroom is we want to try to think, how can we design an experience that takes them out of the classroom to support that literacy is everywhere in the world? So maybe you can take them on a community classroom. So if you end up teaching here in Medicine Hat, maybe you take them to Medalta. Maybe you immerse them in vocabulary, sorry, like kiln, clay, simple machines, levers, gears. Maybe you take them on a field trip to the Esplanade where you talk about curtains and stage and concession and billboard and posters, and you talk about plays and authors and the whole art side of presenting a story. Or maybe you just take an intentional trip to the playground where you could talk about slide, fun, wind, slippery, mud. Like, there's just so many things that we should be thinking about taking our kids outside, physically outside of the classroom, so that they again can see that literacy is everywhere. Oh, and these were our students out at Cyprus. We take our third years out to Cyprus at the beginning of the year to just to experience a little bit of the community classroom and how that can impact learning. Okay. Also, what you want to think about doing is, can you think about bringing in book discussions or book clubs where they actually choose, just like a real book club, they actually choose a book and then they get together with their colleagues and they have all read the same book and then they have a bit of a go with the book. So these are my third years from last year, and they do an own choice book club. So they read a book, and then this is pre-COVID times because look how close they are to each other. Seems a little bizarre now, doesn't it? But they got together and they had a coffee and they made it a really kind of joyful, fun experience. So again, think about bringing that in to our language arts time. Okay. We're also going to look at the concept of balanced literacy model. And again, this is one that is still very, very dominant out in the schools, but it's starting, some people are like, yeah, there's some glitches in the silver lining of this particular one, but it's still a really solid, dominant model that you'll see out there. How the instructional strategy of balanced literacy model I really like. Some of the components I do think have some issues, but I'll get into those when they come up. So basically a balanced literacy model is you start with modeled instruction, and then you go down to shared instruction, then you go down to guided instruction, and then ultimately you get them into independent practice, which is ultimately where we want our students to be, we want them to be able to read independently. I think oftentimes what we do as teachers is we model something, right? We model it on the board, we go up there and we explain it, and then we send the kids out directly into independent practice. We don't do this step, or these two steps, sorry. We don't do these two steps. What generally happens in a classroom when we jump from modeled instruction, where we're doing it all on the board, blah, 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 we show it to them, and then we say, okay, go off and do it. I think lots of times the kids who get it will get it, and they will go off and do it. The kids who don't get it will waste time and they won't get it, and then it's just a big classroom management issue and they don't actually learn what we want. So I do like this model in that it has like this meaty, it's kind of like a sandwich, right? This is the meaty stuff. This is where you actually are figuring out if they know what the concept is. Okay, so let's have a look at this. I'm going to go through a little bit more, some examples of this, actually in Collaborate time, but just to kind of get you thinking about the model. So basically, the model is, it involves, for modeled reading, it involves modeling instruction and strategies through think alouds. So you as the teacher actually are reading something and you come to a word, and I mean, you know what the word is, but you're going, I don't actually know what this word is. What are some strategies that I'm going to use? And you actually think aloud. You actually say that to the students, and so that they can start to actually hear your thought process. Because oftentimes we assume that they know some of the strategies, but they actually don't. Okay, so that's modeled reading. Again, I'm going to give you some demos in our collaborate time. We also have shared reading. This is the next step. This is when students join in or share while seeing the text, and that's a huge part of it, is they have to be able to actually see the text. And possible ways to do shared reading is you talk about the title, you talk about the cover, you talk about the title page, so they can actually see, where's a book here? They can actually, here we go. They have to actually be able to see the book. Okay, then you do a picture walk through the book, briefly pointing out the character and the plot. So you would just go, okay, let's look at this. Look at these pictures. What's going on? What do you think's going on? They do some prediction, things like that. Then you read through it once for enjoyment, and that's where you would point to each word, maybe, if that's where you're at with your kids, and you read fluently and naturally so that they hear the story completely. Okay, and then you can go back and have them do it again, and then you can add in different things after that. But that's shared reading where they can see it, but you are still reading it to them, and you're giving them access to the text many, many times. Okay, then there's guided reading. This is probably what you're seeing in small groups. So this is when you pull maybe 2 or 3 students together who really need work on their capitalization. They're really in their writing, or sorry, that's maybe a bad example because I wasn't doing. Maybe in their reading, they are not getting their sight words. So then you would pull those 3 kids together and just work on sight words. It's very intentional and it's very systematic. You have a laser sharp focus of what you want to do in that time. And you provide specific reading strategies in small groups. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to go to the website and watch from 0 to 1 minute and then like 5 to 5:30. You're welcome to watch the whole thing if you want, but particularly, I think this will give you a good idea of what a guided reading time is. Okay, so go there now, do that. Okay, welcome back. And finally, this is the final section of a balanced reading format, is independent reading. Ultimately, this is where we want our kids to get to, right? So students use acquired skills independently. So all of the things that you've been working on through modeled, through shared, through guided reading is they're now implementing. Students should engage with books of, I'm going to circle this, their own choice. Books are not leveled in this independent reading time. Fontes and Pinnell, when they created their leveled readers, I don't think ever thought that it would become such a monster. They only wanted leveled readers for guided reading time to teach specific, that didn't work, to teach specific, oh wow, that's even more exciting, to teach specific skills. I'm just not going to do the pencil right now, but you want to let in independent reading time, you want to let your students read their own choice books, because think about a book that you are forced to read, like a textbook or something like that you're not totally into. How inspired are you to read? Probably not so inspired. Now think about a grade 2 kid who maybe is not that into reading, and then you're going to force him to read something that he's not interested in. It all compounds. Okay, so that's an important part. Okay, literacy time. So basically, when you're setting up your literacy program, think about every day you have a read aloud. You have some kind of you read them a book every day. You do some modeled and shared reading, and students should read independently for pleasure. 2 or 3 times a week, you do guided and independent reading. Students work with sight words and vocab, and they share orally about something that they have read. So that's kind of your overall structure. Okay, let's look at materials briefly. These are, again, some materials that you we'll probably utilize as reading resources. So you can definitely use, I call them box programs, so literacy place programs. So these are the Scholastic Literacy Place programs. They look like this. You probably will see these in your class, your practicums, especially if you are in the Catholic board, because I believe every school has Scholastic Literacy Place, these actual boxes. You will find this actually in the MHC library. So if you're looking up this, you might see this one in our library there. Okay, so Nelson Literacy is the same kind of thing. It's a box set created by these publishers. Again, I would use them, but use them carefully. They're standardized, so they're not specific for your students. They can't be. They're a box set, so you have to make it exciting, and you have to bring it into the classroom that you are particularly in. Okay. You also have choices of basically basal reading series. These are the series that were book series that were written specifically to teach kids to read. So the Dick and Jane primers, which are kind of old now, but we still have Dr. Seuss is definitely a basal reading series because it's written with lots of rhyming words and lots of nonsense words, but it's trying to get the kids to understand those sounds and understand rhyme. So it's written basically to encourage kids to read, but it doesn't have a lot of real deep comprehension skills to go with it. Trade books are basically, they were written a bit as a bit of a response to the basal reading series, which didn't really have much of a storyline. These are basically all of the books that I've been reading you. So anything that I've been reading you, this one's coming up. It's actually where the storyline is actually interesting. It's not just words or rhymes. The actual story is important. And then we have non-book resources. So any things like newspapers, magazines, brochures, and any kind of e-resource. So text, blogs, Facebook, that kind of thing. So again, when you are thinking about your language arts time, creating your language arts program, think about these particular materials and how you can kind of bring the best from all of these particular resources. Okay, what we're going to do in Collaborate is I'm going to, when we get there, I'm going to break you up into groups of, 3 or 4, somewhere in there, and you're going to create a little tableau of one of these. So a tableau is basically where you go into a still form to display the meaning of whatever you're trying to display. So if I was trying to display something like a concept like critical thinking, I might just kind of go like this. And then you stay there. And then one person in your group will narrate for about 30 to 45 seconds and tell us the essence of these instructional strategies. And the rest of you on screen, on your camera, will be doing whatever you want to do to display that. So just be thinking about how you might, in Tableau, display your understanding of these 7 instructional strategies, but you're just going to end up doing one of them on during our Collaborate time. Okay, awesome. This was a big romp through, but I think it's some really interesting stuff. Hopefully you are seeing some of these things happening in your practicum, and we'll talk about that in Collaborate. See you later.